What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, and I welcome you to the show this evening. We're going to be going over a couple different things. It's not going to be a super long show tonight, but there's a couple things that I kind of wanted to hit on that I think were of interest and noteworthy of talking about. Before that, a little bit of housekeeping. I am still working on, and I think we're getting really close. To be able to get that episode about the bills and the legislation, how to draft those. I know that's kind of been in the works for a while, and I've been kind of giving you updates as time's been going on, but I think we're almost to our conclusion point, and hopefully we'll be able to get that out to you guys pretty soon. That will more than likely also be a live episode. But as soon as I have a hard date and as soon as I know that everything is in line, I will let you guys know as soon as possible. In addition, something that I had completely failed to do is to mention that I do have an Instagram. So for those of you who utilize Instagram, even if it's for nothing more than just having a presence to stay connected with friends and family, I do have an Instagram. I will put that down in the description below. Words are hard tonight. Down in the description below. So that way, if you want, you can give me a follow on Instagram there, where I tend to do a little bit better on providing some updates as to when the shows are going to be airing, when I'll be live, etc. And also, you'll have kind of an idea of what the topic is going to be for that week. In addition, I'm going to be getting Tom Edlin back. Next week, we're going to be talking in kind of an open-ended discussion pertaining to economics once again. I always love having Tom on. He is a wealth of knowledge, and he brings a lot to the table. And also, he has recently written an article about the big, beautiful bill, as it's called. And I'm sure you guys, if you've ever watched any of the episodes that I've had Tom on, I'm sure you know what kind of to expect in terms of his perceptions, his point of view, and also his analysis of what that type of bill is going to entail and ultimately where it's going to lead. So that's going to be a really good discussion for next week. So I hope to see you all there, and hope to be able to provide a good basis of conversation between me and Tom. And I always, like I said, enjoy having him there. I just want to throw out real quick, Ground Fog, welcome in. Gene, it's great to have you. Chuck, thanks for stopping in tonight. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming in and supporting the work that I try to do. Hopefully it is worth your time. And without further ado, I will give you kind of just an overview of what the show is going to be tonight. So as for the couple of things that I want to discuss tonight, you'll have to forgive me. I have some notes on Post-it cards. I want to kind of go over briefly just what the recent goings on between Russia and Ukraine have been, really kind of our disposition in terms of all of these things that are going on, our involvement. And I want to, kind of paint somewhat of an overview as to everything that's involved there. But also I want to take a little bit of time tonight also to go over the realm of the expansion of information, more specifically the brokering and the circumventing of not utilizing warrants by these federal agencies to take your information, whether it's medical information, billing information, and other types of private information, which in every other case, constitutionally, they would need to have a warrant, or they would need to follow a legal process in order to get this information. Now we're seeing that not only is this information not going to be spread out and somewhat difficult to get, but now they're trying to basically consolidate all of this information in one central location. And the wonderful, wonderful, as I like to say in parentheses, company of Palantir seems to be at the very center of it. And unfortunately, so is seemingly Trump. And for those of you who've seen me on the Mission Critical podcast back in the day, I was talking about this well before Trump had gotten reelected, and I said there is a serious issue with Trump meeting with, being involved with, and dealing with Peter Thiel and Palantir. I felt that it was going to come to a head, and here we are. Now we're starting to see some pretty legitimate conversations around the consolidation of personal and private information for the use of these federal agencies to basically have a workaround of the Constitution to where it's not only going to be more centralized, but it's going to be easier to access. So that being said, I know that was a lot. Let's jump into it. So there were a number of different incidents that occurred recently as it pertained to Ukraine. Ukraine launched a pretty, let's be honest, a fairly well thought out attack, if you will, on Russia. I know this might be a little bit old for some people, but long story short of it, they went after the strategic, one of the strategic triads of Russia. Now, the numbers that I have and the numbers that I have seen being pretty consistently reported is we're looking at somewhere around, 7, maybe 10 of the Tupolev style bombers that were either destroyed or it was like a mix of destroyed and needing of serious repair. Now, this is now obviously not a serious amount, but it does create a pretty precarious situation, right? Now, I know that there's numbers out there estimating into the 40s, 41. For me, I would also say that it is very much worth taking any of the numbers technically with a grain of salt, although it does seem that there has been since some drone footage of an overview of the area supporting the lower end of the numbers versus the wider 40 to 41 number. So with that being said, I think this presents a very serious situation. As I had mentioned, I believe it was earlier this week when I was on the podcast with Mark and Blake, for Millstone, I had brought up the point that, this may very well change the standard of the START treaty. Now, something that I want to emphasize is when it comes to the START treaty, Russia did pull out of the START treaty. However, in an act of good faith, they remained in the same position where they would leave their strategic bombers still out on the tarmac, as we have, and it's kind of been just a goodwill gesture in honoring at least the premise of the treaty, even though that Russia is no longer a part of it. And so it becomes a situation, however, and Gene, I'm really happy that you brought that up, is now, what type of precedent does this set? I mean, do they continue to maintain their fleet outside and still in the open, or are they going to pull some of their fleet back and put them into hardened structures? And if that's the case, I mean, what we're talking about is the changing of the landscape as it pertains to nuclear triads, not just for Russia, but for us and for other nuclear armed countries. Is now you're starting to change the baseline of how we're going to operate, right? And what you get with that is typically it's like a very I don't want to say a subtle escalation, but it really does start to beg the question is like, how much farther are we going to go? How much closer to the abyss are we going to go? How much time off of that proverbial end of the world clock are we taking? And I would argue that it's getting pretty close. And so it's, so there's that situation. And Chuck, I'm really happy you brought that up because that's the other area that I want to get to as well. Beyond the strategic bombers, we also had Ukraine that went after the Russian populace, as Chuck had pointed out, and as I was going to get into here, is the trains. There was also, I believe, another attempt on the Kerch Bridge, which was not successful. And what we're starting to see is we're really starting to see an escalatory process here from Ukraine into this realm to where it's not really even focusing necessarily on military targets, but it's becoming more and more predominantly civilian targets. And I think we've seen that escalation and that switch of doctrine well within the last year, especially as they had gone into Kursk and as they were getting pushed out of Kursk. There's a number of aerial footage and different videos and stuff like that that we could see from what they've left in their wake. Now, that all of that being said, that does not mean that, in the end of the day, when Russia, launches retaliatory strikes, that you're not going to have the potential for civilian casualties over in places like Kiev. It's unfortunately a part of where that goes into, although I would argue that if you look at the way that they've conducted the war, I think, in my personal opinion, based off of what I've seen from the analysis that I've reviewed, I think that their doctrine is less about trying to go after the civilian populace in places like Kiev, and they're trying to stay fundamentally a little bit more on the military targets. Now, I know one of the biggest issues as it pertains to this back and forth over the last several years is when it comes to the AD that Ukraine has. The AD, or air defense, has been notorious for either losing its guidance and hitting their own people, or as it goes to intercept or as it gets close to intercept, it blows apart. And so you have shrapnel that comes down on the buildings too. So it's one of those things that it also becomes somewhat hard to determine what it was exactly at times that is hitting some of these civilian buildings as it pertains to the retaliatory strikes. So what I would recommend is, like, if you're analyzing the news at all, it's very important to try and go through a bunch of different sources and then try and actually figure out what's going on. Time and time and again, what we found is Ukraine would say, well, like, there's a bunch of deliberate attacks on this building or this civilian populace, and then you end up seeing that you have scraps of the air defense where a missile, their own air defense missile, ended up hitting their own buildings. And I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but we have to be very, very careful and trepidatious in terms of the type of information we take in. So it's a lot to sift through. Most certainly, when you look at the Kerch Bridge in particular, and then when you look at the civilian infrastructure, especially as it pertains to the trains, we are starting to see a different posture from Russia in terms of what they are more aggressively starting to label as what terrorism is. It was just recently that they had basically considered Zelensky and the Ukrainian government very openly. They called them terrorists and basically a terrorist body. And what's important about that is when they take that disposition, or when they take that posture, usually all bets are off at that point. So it's going to be very interesting to see what proceeds in the following days and weeks as to how their posture is going to be gone about and the types of retaliation that is going to stem from this. Either way, I would say that we are not sitting as collectively as a world in a very good position right now. And the other point that I want to make is when we analyze everything that's going on right now, from the strategic bombers being hit to the train to the Kerch Bridge, and even before that, there was the assassination attempt of a high-ranking Russian official. And I believe there is one other situation. When we look at all of these different things, a lot of these situations are very, they tend to have a little bit more of a coordinated component to them. And especially when you look at the drones and you look at the targeting analysis and all of the things that go into this, a lot of the things that Ukraine uses they either can't do it by themselves, or they don't have the coordinate package or the targeting data to utilize. And the reason for that is because we've provided them systems, but we're not going to provide them essentially with the keys or the coordinate package or the data to use that. Therefore, we need to have people setting those coordinates up, telling them where to shoot, how to shoot it, and then they pull the trigger. And this creates a very serious problem, because if it is found that the CIA, MI6, or any other entity that exists had a hand in attacking not only the nuclear triad of Russia, but also was involved at all, which if you ask me, I think is very, very likely. I think that there's been evidence of involvement for quite a long time of Western intelligence agencies and other forces being on the ground, or at least within the vicinity of Ukraine, since a lot of this started. If this is found out, this is going to set a very dangerous precedent, even more so than where we're at. And I fear that this type of escalation is going to be very, very hard to draw back from. And Gene, it's crazy, because I've heard the discussion of what this looks like, and I've heard people saying it's like a 21st century World War I, where you have the trenches, but then it's like you have all of the technological involvement, and so you have kind of this trench warfare and these slow creeping lines that are pushing across. But then it's like you have all of the contemporary technology and threats and all of that. So it is very interesting to see how this whole thing is metastasizing and kind of morphing into this sense of warfare that we have today. One thing that I think sticks out to me a lot, especially not just with Ukraine and Russia, but even as it pertains to several other parts of the world, is our foreign policy. The United States foreign policy has seemingly, especially as it pertains to the disposition of Trump, I'm actually very convinced it depends on what day he wakes, what side of the bed he wakes up on what day. But it seems like we don't really have a consistent foreign policy to go forward with. And this is something that I think is very problematic for us, especially if we are trying to, attempt to create a bridge for peace. We say one thing, and when I say we, I mean, of course, the U.S. federal government. They go forth and they say one thing one day, and then they say another thing another day. And it's also very disingenuous and very, very difficult to start to argue for peace when you're still perpetually arming the other side. And you're sitting there telling somebody that, hey, you have to come to the peace table, when the one side has brought up proposal after proposal, and the side that we're arming, supporting, and basically paying for all of their efforts, that side is perpetually, and you can go back and you can look this up and you can do all the research you want, but from the very, very inception, when Russia started coming into this, there was a proposal on the table that was available, that was ready to be signed. We and Britain told them not to do it, and that was nixed. And now they're going to end up, Ukraine is going to end up, if not with a worse deal than what they could have initially gotten, is on the brink of complete and utter destruction. And I'm not even just talking necessarily in a military manner. I mean, I'm talking about the fact that they've essentially become a nation without sovereignty, and we have had a hand in that, and we've had a hand in provoking perpetually the Russians for decades. And so when you cobble all of these situations up together, you look at where we are, and you look at where Great Britain is, and you look at where France and Germany and all of these, the Western, as they like to call it, the Western allies, or NATO. When you look at their ambitions, you look at their goals, and you look at all of the different things leading up to 2014, going beyond 2014, the idea of like, there has to be peace, there has to be this, and then you you get something that is just so ostensibly over the line. And I'm not saying that it's not a legitimate military target, being the strategic bombers, but we also have to consider, where does that leave us? And I would argue that this is going to potentially change the disposition and the doctrine of how we go about not only conducting our own business, but how the Russians are going to, and how things are going to be conducted in the future. Now, what that looks like, I can't tell you, but I can only hypothesize and provide my opinions on where I think this can go. And I don't think it's anything good, especially when we have a very, very inconsistent foreign policy, where one day we wake up, we're trying to bring people together. The other day, we're about ready to walk away. It's literally like being a 5-year-old that throws a temper tantrum, and then 5 minutes later, it's just like, oh, everything is fine. Like, this is not the way that you handle foreign relations. It's a very detrimental way of handling foreign relations. And in a time where we need to be very trepidatious, we need to be, considerate, at least at what's on the table and what's at stake. We have to be willing to be in a position to where we can reasonably sit down and talk to these people, and not just try to go in to get our way, but to also try to, in particular, understand what it is that they're trying to put across. And I think we've had these talks and these conversations before recent events, and even after, to where it's been like just tone deaf. It's like the idea of that talks and negotiations are happening, but nobody's actually at home on the other side, and the other side being us. I think this is a very dangerous situation right now. And it's there's one more element that goes into this that I haven't even touched on yet, that I do want to address, and that is Blumenthal and Graham going over to Ukraine, like basically in and around the same time as this situation unfolded, as the attack from Ukraine unfolded. And they're sitting down and they're having conversations with Ukraine, and in a manner that violates, as many legal professionals and many constitutional individuals have pointed out, is becoming a violation of the Logan Act. It is a violation of the Logan Act, up to and including things to seditious behavior. These people cannot be going over. Graham and Blumenthal cannot be going over there. They cannot be negotiating. They cannot be brokering these deals or whatever these particular conversations are when it's in and around an event like this, and when you have active fighting going on, or in any instance whatsoever. What these individuals have done is not only have they put us in a very compromised position, but what they're doing is a complete violation of not only their oath, not that they really care about that at all, but of the Constitution. And this is something that I think also is going to set a precedent as to how we, continue to conduct foreign affairs and foreign policy in the future. Because if there's nothing that comes from this, if there's nothing that is done about the fact that these guys go over, and mind you, both of these gentlemen, during their stay at their hotels, spent roughly around $800,000 combined for their hotel stays. Now, I don't know about you, I'm not the most foremost traveler in the world, but I've never heard of a hotel costing $800,000 for two people. And there's a pretty hefty insinuation that during the time that Lindsey Graham, and I believe it was, who was it? Was it Rick Blumenthal? I believe it was Rick. I know Blumenthal, but when those two gentlemen went over, where did that money go? Where's the accountability for that money? $800,000. Like, that's a lot of money to be staying at a hotel. You're not paying that much money for a hotel. It doesn't matter where you're going in the world. And it was a fairly quick trip, and it's one that I think is going to really, really keep a bad taste in the mouth of foreign policy, foreign relations, especially as it pertains to the Russians. And at this juncture, I mean, to be completely fair, they have no reason to believe anything that any of our officials say, our bureaucrats say. At this juncture, we say one thing, we do a completely other. We wake up tomorrow, we flip flop, and we don't even have the consistent foreign policy that a lot of that a lot of the people say that we do, and it only continues to creep us closer to this ledge of the abyss. And so I think there's going to be a lot to see in the coming weeks, to see how things are going to move along, to see what the further response is by Russia, what our responses are towards the ongoing events that are occurring, and how we're going to deal with Ukraine in totality in that situation. Now, personally, me, if I would be cutting off funding, full stop. They wouldn't get another dime. They would get no more equipment. They would get nothing. You would have to pull out, because at this point, even in trying to mediate peace talks, we are not, a third party. We are not an unbiased third party. We can't even in good faith negotiate a proper end to the war, because we're actively contributing to the war, as well as the UK and several other countries. So it becomes very, very tumultuous, very chaotic, and there's not really a lot of trust or any sense of stability that's coming from this situation whatsoever. It's very detrimental. And so I just hope, as I always say, we make it one more day without succumbing to nuclear hellfire. And I hope that at some point that the fighting comes to an end, and I hope that there's some type of stability that does occur eventually. I think that's the best thing that we can hope for. And hopefully no more people have to die. It's a really unfortunate thing, and unfortunately, even more so, the United States has its fingerprints all over this, and it's pretty sad. So that being said, as time goes on, I'll continue to monitor the situation, provide some updates, and try to bring a somewhat reasonable perspective to all of the chaos. I'm never going to try and make an assertion that I don't feel is reasonable, or that is as far outside the bounds of at least being reasonably factual or of decent nature anyways. So I will do the best that I can to continue to bring that forward. Now, one of the second topic that I wanted to get into tonight is the realm of this growing surveillance state, this growing collection of information amongst the American populace. This is nothing new, and a lot of people have said, well, this isn't surprising. These information, these agencies collect this information all the time. It's not really that bad, and we're seeing a lot of the same old excuses by the same proponents, who kind of excuse and try to talk their way out of having to evaluate something like the Patriot Act as being what it is, which is an egregious and monstrous abridgment of the Constitution. And when we look at what is being considered right now in terms of the consolidation of this information, again, this is relatively basic information. This is billing, this is bank statements, this is medical information, and so on and so forth. And it goes even deeper and broader than that. We're talking about a situation to where we're already seeing a circumvention of numerous agencies that are illegally and unconstitutionally accessing this information. But what they want to do is, instead of having to go through one agency and another agency to get this information in whatever way that they have to, they want to try and consolidate this information to make it much easier. And on top of that, you're starting to see the introduction of a group like Palantir, which would make that even easier and create a collection point to where they don't necessarily have to get a warrant. They don't necessarily have to go through, the checks and balances and the constitutional alignment that they have to in order to get this information, which is ironic considering the fact that constitutionally none of these agencies should be existing to begin with. So that conversation notwithstanding, what we're seeing is now you have the ability of these agencies to get all this information collectively in one place. And now they can just go out and they can start to broker deals. They can now purchase information. They can buy information. They can access this information by a way or means that in their mind allows them to circumvent the Constitution without having to get a proper warrant. And that means all of your information is easily accessible and available, ripe for the picking, for them to take whenever they want for the right price, and so on and so forth. And I think that this presents a very, very trepidatious point in American history, because not only do we have this type of collectiving or information collection mentality really rearing its ugly head. It's been considered to be like the Patriot Act 2.0. But you're also having this in a time where we're involved in numerous conflicts. We are cracking down on a person's free speech. We are cracking down on what a person can support, what they can't support. We're cracking down on the way that who people can criticize, who they can't criticize. And so what this becomes is a kind of a melting pot for all of the worst things to happen, to where if you go and criticize the wrong country, the wrong person, et cetera, not only are they really trying to crack down on that type of behavior and potentially try and bring you up on whatever charge it is that they see fit nowadays, but they're also trying to pursue a behavior that's going to make that infinitely easier to be able to access your information without having to do it in the constitutional way, without having to go through the constitutional checks and balances in a way that is going to supposedly circumvent all of these processes to keep them in check, to keep government in check. And when I had seen, way back in the very inception of, Trump starting to run again, and I started to see a lot more of the introduction of Peter Thiel and looking at Palantir. JD Vance is also very fairly cozy with Peter Thiel and Palantir. When I started to see this, I started to try and make this connection already months and over a year ago, well over a year ago. And I'm like, this is not going to be a good thing if Trump continues to go down, to talk to these people, to have dialogue with these people, because at some point it's going to hit a point to where you're going to have the wrong people that are going to try and bend his ear to convince him that this is the right thing to do. Unfortunately, when we thought that we got Tulsi Gabbard into her position, we thought she was going to be a champion of privacy and constitutionalism and the way that she conducted herself prior to being into the DNI position. And unfortunately, what happened is as soon as she went up for her evaluation and she took her job, she started to 180 on all these things. And so you're creating a situation in which all of these people that talked about caring so much about the Constitution, caring so much about the rights and the liberties of the people, are now spinning around. They're willing to sell you out. They're willing to usurp your liberty, your life, your right to life, and your right to privacy and property and all of these different things for the benefit, supposedly, of the common good, and being able to assist these agencies that not so long ago, they were just having a conversation about how terrible these agencies were and what an affront to the Constitution they are. And I think that, you're going to have a segment of the population that are going to sit there and try and talk to you and convince you, that it's real, it's 16D chess. It's really not what it looks like. But in the end of the day, how long are we going to kick the can down the road before we can start to recognize these things for what they are? You know, it's we can't sit here and delude ourselves about what these particular events are starting to be, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, whether it's the collective, you know, the collection and creating a central collection point for our information, our private information, and so many of the things that are about our lives to be freely bought and sold between all of these agencies now, as opposed to having to go through a proper form and function to some degree of being able to ostensibly put a damper on these things. You know, how long are we going to provide the excuse for these people to abuse us? Essentially, it's being in an abusive situation with people who don't care about you, who say the things that you want to hear, that make you feel good, so when you go to the polls that you can make a confident decision. But what I would argue is we have a situation where not enough people are willing to throw away, disregard, or critically take a point of view of their favorite party or their favorite person in order to try and further the realm of liberty. And as a result, we this is what we start to get. I'm going to take a look at the comments here. It looks like Gene is saying we are using Chinese tech and products to make safe the UK. Spy on. How free is that? You know, it's really amazing because, well, I think that there's an argument to be made about, you know, some technological realms to where you have countries that provide other products that do create ostensible backdoors or issues or things like that. I think it's really got to bring into question at this point, you know, what is it that, you know, our own governments are doing that they're doing to abridge our rights and our liberties, our right to privacy, our, you know, the right to live our lives as we see fit. And when I look at these data collection points or this realm of trying to centralize and bring to the middle, the center, all of our data in a one convenient place where you can have, whether it's the FBI, the DEA, the NSA, whatever, whoever it is that wants to come and buy this information, now they don't need a warrant. You know, this is as bad as having some foreign actor or foreign influence provide products or provide technology. I would still ostensibly say that the greatest threat is the one that we tend to face at home. And we see this not only in the centralization and usurpation of information of the average American or the average you know, person in the UK, for your example, Gene, but what we've also started to see is, and it's something that's remained very true, that the instruments used for war abroad are oftentimes the tools of tyrants at home. And so any time that they try to make this argument that it's for your own good, for your safety, it's one of the most disingenuous, one of the most fraudulent, one of the most underhanded phrases that they can make ever. And we should not be yielding to this type of behavior. Just the same as we should not be allowing people like Graham, like Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal to go across to start having conversations with people within the Ukrainian government shortly around the time that they launched an attack on the strategic triad of Russia. And then all of a sudden, all of this money is just spent supposedly on hotel stay. And then they come back as if nothing ever happened. And the reality of it is they neither have the authority to do that. They do not have the constitutional ability to do that. Quite frankly, again, we're looking at a violation of the Logan Act, seditious behavior, traitorous behavior, by the color of the or by the application of the Logan Act. And what is the course of action for the consequences? If we're not willing to hold these people accountable, then what we get is a further usurpation of the liberties and rights of the people. And in general, you're creating a much more dangerous environment, not just for the United States, but around the world. And I think it really erodes any form of goodwill or trust with friendlies and perceived enemies alike. And it's not the way to treat your people at home, and it's most certainly not the way to go about foreign diplomacy or diplomacy abroad, if you will, with any other country, whether they're a perceived enemy or whether they are a friend. And so I think that there's a lot of really alarming things that are starting to really take root, especially when I think people were feeling very optimistic that things were going to change, and I still hope that to some degree that there's going to be some realm of change that is tangible. But what we're starting to see is a lot of this behavior. It's really straying away, not only from a constitutional point of view or a liberty oriented point of view, but really something that is very self-serving. And something that is going to really be enriching to the government, regardless of what the second and third order effects tend to be. And again, you can use people like the association with Teal and Palantir, or the flagrant trips and violations of our Constitution by Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, going and dealing with the Ukrainians in a manner that is just abhorrent, quite frankly. So, it's hard sometimes to get a pulse on where exactly everything's going to go. And I guess kind of to wrap this up, I think we have to be very trepidatious moving forward as it pertains to Russia and Ukraine. I think the only logical way that we as the United States need to continue to move forward is by, again, stopping all of the funding, stopping all of the assistance, stopping every drip of aid and assistance to Ukraine, and not being a contributor to the fighting anymore. Because in the end of the day, again, it does not make us an honest broker of peace. It makes us quite the opposite. And I think that, if we're being honest, if we, which I really believe we do, given our track record, if we had anything to do with the coordination of the bombing of the strategic triad of Russia's bombers, of the train attack or the train bridge attack, the Kerch Bridge, the assassination of high-ranking officials, if we are involved in that is extremely damning. And one final thing I just want to say about that is, whether Trump knew or didn't know, this is a very bad situation for the United States to be in. This is a situation that we never had to be in to begin with, being stuck in between Russia and Ukraine. But unfortunately, we are here, and unfortunately, we are a contributor to the chaos that is occurring. And I really sincerely hope that we don't have to be in this position for much longer. I hope that realistic, calmer, cooler, more diplomatic heads can prevail to where we can not necessarily, just talk our way out of the situation, but actually try to affect a meaningful conclusion. And if we can't, then we can't, and then it's not our battle. And for my friends over in Europe, well, I don't really know what the message is, other than hold on, don't stop fighting for your liberty and your rights, and don't stop advocating for the cessation of your country's involvement in the current conflagration. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, at least in potentially for Poland. Poland just got a new president, and this is a person who seems very disinterested in the conflict. He seems very disinterested in being in cahoots with the EU. And so Poland may be able to have somewhat of a good advocacy moving forward, to where they can start to really make their own decisions and start to determine the course that their country wants to make, and as well as a few other countries. So I wish the best for those countries that got a change of leadership, and I really hope for the countries that are trying to get on that path that you guys find a way forward. as it pertains to the collection of data and information and the centralization and the ease of access to this stuff by way of agencies. This is something that we have to become very serious about. We have to, as individuals, we have to start moving forward, and we have to start putting our foot down against stuff like this, especially not just withstanding the collection of information, but also this realm to where you have these same individuals that are trying to determine who it is you can and cannot criticize, who it is you can and cannot boycott, who it is you can and cannot speak out against, who it is you can and cannot have an opinion against. This is antithetical to who we are as Americans. And quite frankly, it's antithetical to any notion of the right of a person to be free to go about their business so long as they're not infringing on the liberty and rights of other people. And it is a complete abhorrent an abomination to naturally existing rights, to the Constitution of the United States. And it needs to be quelled. These people need to be held accountable and not let off the leash. And by allowing this to take root and get more strength, especially at the local level, you're only going to see this growing monstrosity of the monster state continue to spiral more and more out of control. So I think, we have to get involved, and we have to get active in areas that are reasonable, in areas that we can do some work in. And that means that we have to get out and we have to network, and we have to create that community, and we have to be able to either learn skills or become an asset in helping in this fight, because in the end of the day, it takes each and every single one of us. This is not something to where we have the option to sit on the sidelines and expect things to just get better. And that's not just something in particular for the United States. That's anywhere that endeavors to be a little bit more liberty oriented and a little bit more free tomorrow than we are today, and more importantly for our future generations. So we have to get out there. We have to get into the fight. We have to stay educated and learn, and we have to grow. We have to have the ability of self-governance and the ability to maintain a sense of personal responsibility. And only by doing that can we make a meaningful change. So I hope this was a fruitful discussion for everybody tonight. I apologize if I went a little bit quick. I'm fairly tired. I did not get much sleep last night, so I tried to do this as coherently as possible. But I really appreciate everybody who stopped in and took the time out of their day to watch this episode. I really hope you got something out of this, and perhaps it provided or evoked a little bit of thought and consideration on your behalf. If you have anything that you'd like to contribute to this particular conversation or any other conversation that we're going to have down the road, please always feel free to put it in the comment section down below. Even after the live is done, I still love to hear from you guys and gals, and to be able to have a meaningful conversation. So that way we can grow, we can learn, and we can go forth and be active together. I think it's the pinnacle of what a free people, a liberty-oriented people are intended to be. So with that being said, I'm just going to go over one more time. Next week, I am planning to have Tom Edlam back on. He is a fellow at the Libertarian Institute. He is an economist. He's a very smart guy. For those of you who've been around and watched those particular episodes that I've had Tom on, you'll know he's got a lot that he brings to the table, and I would argue he has a pretty good sense of humor when it comes to talking about some serious situations. So we're going to have a pretty general economic discussion. I'm going to kind of let him just take it and bounce off on a few pieces that he would like, and I also want to have a more in-depth conversation about the quote-unquote big beautiful bill. So I really hope that you guys and gals come and join us next Saturday at 1700 Central Daylight Time, or 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time for those who don't understand the 24-hour clock, and join in on that discussion. And what I would also say too is, if you have, this may be a really good opportunity as well to, if you have any economic questions for Tom, or if there's anything that you would like to bring to bear to ask him about, Please feel free to bring those questions, and I will do the very best to get those questions over to Tom so he can answer those questions to you guys live if he has the ability to do so. I try to keep it as interactive as I can, and I hope that is something that you guys like and enjoy as well. So again, if you have any comments, if you have anything to add, share your perspective, your opinion, whether you agree, disagree, leave it down below in the comments. I will also throw a link in my description later here in this video for the Instagram page for you guys and gals to be able to follow. So that way you can get better, more real-time updates on what the episodes are going to be, when they're going to be, and then that way you don't ever miss an episode. In case YouTube decides that they don't want to notify you, you have a secondary location to check that out. So as always, I really appreciate everybody coming by tonight. Thank you for your patronage. Thank you for your viewership, your support. It really means the world to me. I can't do this without any of you. You're all vital, and I really, really appreciate you. So go forth into liberty, carry that torch forward, be the light in your community, learn, get activated, make a difference, and we will see you on the next one next Saturday at 1700 Central Daylight Time. Take care, and God bless.